I'm Lena Carter. I'm 32 years old, standing in the marble foyer of my grandmother's mansion, watching my relatives swirl through the room like peacocks at a gala. Their designer heels click against polished floors, diamond-studded. Watches glitter under the chandelier, and whispers flow behind manicured hands, but I know the truth. They don't whisper because I don't belong, they whisper because they think I don't. They see my off-the-rack navy blazer, the small silver studs in my ears, and the lack of a luxury logo on my handbag. They see someone living modestly, maybe even struggling. What they don't see is the document tucked in the leather briefcase I carry, the one that quietly reshapes the power dynamic of this entire family. Before I dive into the moment that flipped everything upside down, I'd love to know where you're reading from. Drop your city in the comments, and stick around. Because in the next few minutes, you'll see how Lena, the so-called underdog, silently built an empire while my family was busy admiring their own reflections. The Carters have been a fixture in Boston's real estate scene since the 1920s. My great-grandfather, Arthur Carter, turned a modest inheritance into a property portfolio during the post-war boom. By the 1970s, when my grandmother Margaret took the reins, the Carter name was stamped on luxury developments across New England, but unlike her flashy brothers, Grandma Margaret was strategic. She believed wealth wasn't meant to be flaunted, it was meant to build freedom. She once told me, real money doesn't shout. It whispers and it waits. My father, her youngest son, inherited that same philosophy. He married my mom, a first-grade teacher with zero connections and a heart made of gold. Naturally, it sparked drama in the Carter circles. Marrying beneath him, they said. Settling for small-town life instead of building more Carter capital, but my parents were happy. We lived simply, in a house Dad had designed himself. Mom taught, Dad created homes with soul, and I was raised with two beliefs: money is a tool, not a personality, and family is what you build, not what you inherit. When I was 15, they died in a car crash coming home from a weekend trip. Just like that, everything I knew evaporated. Grandma took me in. The same people who whispered that my mom was a nobody now whispered that I was the family charity case. At night, I'd find Grandma in her study, sipping tea while paging through property reports and old photographs. She'd beckon me in with a quiet smile. Lena, she said once, holding up a yellowing deed, most of our family forgot what money's actually for. They think it's about status. It's not. Real wealth is invisible. It gives you freedom, not attention. I soaked it up. In the 3 years before college, I learned more from her than any business degree could offer. She taught me how to read between the lines of property deals, how to spot undervalued land, how to build quietly, and most importantly, how to wait. Meanwhile, my cousins, Sierra, Cameron, Lexi, Miles, and Jonah, were raised with a different script. My uncle Philip, who declared himself the new patriarch after Grandpa passed, believed money was for display. Sports cars at 16. European shopping trips every spring break. Brand name everything. I, on the other hand, drove my parents' old Toyota and worked after school at a bookstore. Every spare dollar I had went into savings. And when Grandma passed away during my senior year of college, she left each grandchild a small inheritance. The others, they splurged. Lexi flew to Morocco. Jonah bought an absurdly overpriced motorcycle he barely knew how to ride. Cameron sank his into a penthouse rental downtown. Not me. I lived in a studio apartment and bought a triplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood through an anonymous LLC that Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Delaney, helped me set up. I renovated one unit, rented the other two, and rolled the profits into more properties. By the time I turned 28, my portfolio included 12 residential units and 3 commercial spaces, all hidden behind a network of companies. None of them had a clue. Every year, the annual Carter Family Conference was held here at Grandma's estate, a tradition meant to keep us connected. But once Uncle Philip took over, it turned into a thinly veiled competition. Who bought the latest Tesla? Whose stock options hit? Which cousin made partner at a top firm? And every year, I came in my neutral-toned clothes, gave vague updates, and accepted their polite pity with a tight smile. Last year, I got a call from Mr. Delaney. An apartment complex had just hit the market, a sprawling 48-unit property in Brookline. But here's the twist, 5 of my family members lived there. Including Uncle Philip's golden child, Sierra. The owner wanted a discreet sale to avoid scaring tenants. We struck a deal for $28 million that day. I became their landlord, over. The next year, I made minor upgrades, improved maintenance, and gently raised the rent, but still kept it well under market. The goal wasn't to punish. It was to prove a point. This year, word reached me that Uncle Philip intended to propose selling Grandma's mansion. He wanted to cut maintenance costs, he said. What he meant was, the house reminded him that Grandma's legacy belonged to all of us, not just him. So now, here I am, standing in the mansion's foyer again. Same house, same whispers. But everything is about to change. I pulled into the circular driveway Friday afternoon in the same 10-year-old Toyota I'd driven since college. Surrounding me? A parade of status symbols. Sierra's new Range Rover glistened in front of the rose bushes. Aunt Colleen's pearl-white Audi gleamed. Cameron's midnight blue Maserati was parked like it had arrived from a movie set. I slipped into a space between Lexi's convertible and Miles's electric Hummer. My Toyota looked like a misplaced library book at a nightclub. I adjusted my blazer, smoothed down my hair, and stepped out. The mansion looked just as it always had. 3 floors of Georgian elegance, white pillars, ivy-covered brick, garden still in full bloom. My chest tightened as I walked up the steps. This house had once been my sanctuary. Martha, the housekeeper who'd been with us since I was a child, opened the door before I could ring. Miss Lena, she said with a huge smile, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of lavender and warm cookies. Still the only one around here with any sense. I laughed, genuinely. You always know how to make me feel welcome. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Your uncle's been rearranging the weekend agenda. He's called in the family attorney, too. He's making a play. Probably for the house. My suspicions were confirmed. Martha helped me carry my bag to the room I'd lived in during those pivotal years with Grandma. Unlike the rest of the guest rooms, it was untouched. Pale blue walls, white furnishings, a window seat that looked out over the rose garden. On the shelf sat old books Grandma gave me. Finance textbooks and dog-eared classics. My first investment journal. A photo of my parents and me at the Cape. The summer before everything changed, there was a knock on the door. Jessica, my only cousin who never treated me like an outsider, peeked in. I heard you made it, she said, smiling as she leaned against the doorframe. A pediatrician with a warm heart and a Gucci scarf. She played the family game, but never forgot how to be decent. I wanted to warn you, she said. Uncle Philip's making moves. He wants to sell the house. He thinks no one will object. Oh, I'll object, I said calmly, opening my briefcase and pulling out the title transfer paperwork. Jessica's eyes widened. You bought the building, didn't you? The one they all live in. I smiled and then some. That evening, the family gathered in the dining room. A 14-seat table, ornate chandeliers, crystal glasses. Uncle Philip stood at the head, tapping a fork against his wineglass. I propose, he said, that we sell the estate. We could split the funds. Reinvest in new properties. There were murmurs of agreement. Cameron nodded eagerly. Miles checked something on his smartwatch and muttered, good move. I stood slowly. I object, I said. Every head turned. Philip blinked, a slow smile creeping across his face. Lena, dear, we appreciate your input, but this is a decision for those managing significant assets. That's true, I replied, sliding my folder onto the table. So I thought I'd share an update. I now control 42 properties across New England, including the Brookline complex where several of you reside. Silence. Then stunned blinking. I purchased it last year. I've been your landlord ever since. Lexi dropped her wineglass. Sierra turned pale. And the mansion? I continued. I'm buying that too. I've already made an offer to the estate trust. Mr. Delaney is reviewing it now. Uncle Philip's face flushed crimson. You don't have that kind of money, he spat. I didn't, I said. But I built it. Quietly. While you were busy trying to impress each other. I turned to the room. This house isn't just a building. It's a legacy. One grandma left to teach us something you've all forgotten. That wealth isn't about watches or cars. It's about what you build. What you preserve. When the meeting ended, half the family avoided my gaze. A few mumbled awkward congratulations. Jessica gave me a tight hug and whispered, about time. That night, I sat by the window in my old room, watching the stars over the rose garden. The house would be mine soon. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to protect what mattered, and somewhere, I think Grandma would be proud, because in a world full of noise, I'd stayed silent and still won. He's going to propose selling the mansion. Jessica said, her voice low. I froze mid-fold, the weight of her words hanging between us like smoke. The mansion wasn't just another Bennett property. It was our last true connection to Grandma Elizabeth, her vision, her legacy, her memory. Sealed into every antique doorknob and rose bush on the estate. And Uncle Richard wanted to gut it for profit, no doubt replace it with some sterile luxury development he could brag about at cocktail parties. He thinks it's outdated, Jessica added, stepping fully into the room. He's already spoken. To a few developers, quietly, of course. He wants a unanimous vote during the conference. I scoffed. Unanimous. As if that ever happens in this family unless someone's dangling a Rolex in front of them. Jessica gave a half smile, then glanced around the room. You know he doesn't think anyone will oppose him. Especially not you. Why me? I asked, even though I already knew the answer, because he still sees you as the charity case. The girl who grew up on sympathy and hand-me-downs. Not a real player. I felt something hot coil in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was the recognition of every time I'd swallowed my pride while they patronized me. Every polite smile I'd offered while they compared trust funds, talked hedge funds, or complained about their luxury problems. All while I quietly built an empire from nothing that Jessica's eyes were searching mine. But they don't know. Do they? What you've really done. I shook my head. Not yet. She nodded slowly. Well, maybe it's time they did. The next morning, the conference began in the mansion's grand parlor, now more showroom than sanctuary. Velvet armchairs circled the massive fireplace, and a fresh spread of hors d'oeuvres covered the antique walnut buffet table. Of course, everything was catered. Martha, bless her heart, still managed the household operations, but Richard insisted on showing off, even if it meant trampling Grandma's preference for home-cooked simplicity. I walked in fashionably late, on purpose. I knew exactly what I looked like. Conservative dress. Sensible flats. Hair in a low bun. No flashy accessories. Just a black leather briefcase in one hand and the quiet confidence of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. Richard was already mid-monologue when I entered, and so, as we consider the future of the Bennett legacy, he was saying with his usual theatrical hand gestures, we must think not just emotionally, but strategically. The mansion, while beloved, is an underutilized asset. We're sitting on nearly $40 million in land value alone. Of course, he led with the number. Some of the cousins nodded eagerly. Blake, predictably, was already calculating what kind of yacht that would buy. Victoria looked pleased, no doubt imagining a glossy press release with her name attached to a development deal. Brad leaned forward, the newest Rolex on his wrist catching the morning light like a mirror. Then Richard turned, smiling like a politician. Eliza, lovely of you to join us. I was just about to open the floor. I sat, nodded politely, and clicked open my briefcase. Before we take any votes, Richard continued, I think it's only fair to give each family member a chance to express their perspective. Shall we begin with our most pragmatic cousin? He thought he was being clever. I let the comment slide. I stood, calm and poised. Thank you, Uncle Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts. He smirked. Jessica met My eyes across the room and gave the smallest of nods. I know I don't have the flashiest career. No articles written about me. No social media sponsorships. No private jets. I paused, letting a few of them chuckle, but I do have something else, experience. 10 years of it. While the rest of you were acquiring luxury condos, I was acquiring equity. While you flaunted your wealth, I was building mine, silently. I pulled a stack of documents from my briefcase and set them on the glass coffee table. Here are the property records of the real estate I now own outright or control through holding companies. 27 residential properties. 5 commercial buildings. And 1 apartment complex that, I let the sentence linger, houses Blake, Victoria, and Brad. The room fell deathly still. Brad blinked. Wait, what? Yes, I said, keeping my voice even. You all live in units owned by Winter Capital Holdings. That's me. And I've kept rent stable, well below market value, because I still believe in Grandma's philosophy: wealth should be used to build, not just to impress. Victoria stood, her face red. That's manipulative. What's manipulative is planning to sell this mansion behind the family's back, I snapped. Grandma built this place as more than a home. It was her vision of unity, of grounding. She didn't want us to become the kind of family that cashes out its values for another beachfront investment. Uncle Richard bristled. You're being dramatic. This property is a financial opportunity. And I'm exercising mine, I said. Effective immediately, I'm making an offer to purchase the mansion. At full appraised value. In cash. Gasps. Literal gasps. Jessica's eyes went wide. Blake muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, "You've got to be kidding." Uncle Richard narrowed his eyes. You think you can outbid us? I don't have to outbid anyone. You said it yourself, we need a unanimous vote. And I'm voting no on the sale. His face hardened. You think you can play hardball with me? I smiled. I'm not playing, Uncle. This is real. This is earned. And this, I glanced around the room, is what real wealth looks like. Not just money, but vision. Patience. And purpose. The conference dissolved into chaos after that, cousins whispered in corners. Uncle Richard huddled with the family attorney. I stayed seated, letting the weight of the moment settle. I had said what I needed to say. Now it was their move. Jessica came over quietly and sat beside me. I can't believe you did that, she whispered. I can, I replied. Grandma would have wanted me to. She'd be proud. That hit me harder than I expected. We spent the rest of the weekend in a sort of quiet standoff. Richard made no further announcements. Victoria left early, claiming she had work obligations. Blake sulked around the tennis courts, avoiding eye contact. But I didn't mind. I'd said my piece. And I knew the seed had been planted. On Sunday evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rose garden, the family attorney, Mr. Kilpatrick, approached me. Miss Bennett, he said, adjusting his tie. I've spoken with Mr. Richard. He's agreed to your offer, pending final review. I nodded. Send the papers to my attorney. May I ask, he said slowly, why you're doing this? Why keep the mansion? Wouldn't it be easier to let it go? I looked out across the gardens, the same ones Grandma and I used to walk through during long talks about patience, purpose, and legacy, because this house isn't just bricks and mortar. It's memory. It's principle. And because some things aren't supposed to be easy. They're supposed to mean something. He nodded, clearly impressed. Your grandmother would be proud. That was the second time someone had said it that weekend. And somehow, it meant more than any applause or portfolio update ever could. 3 months later, the mansion was officially mine. I didn't change much, just restored it to how Grandma liked it. The family still gathered for holidays, though the dynamics had shifted. They no longer saw me as the poor cousin or the quiet observer, they saw me as someone who had built something real, and every time I walked past the parlor where I made my stand, or sat at the old dining room table where Grandma once ran the family meetings, I reminded myself real wealth isn't what you flaunt. It's what you build when no one's watching, and now, finally, they were watching, but not for the reasons they used to, they were watching, because I had become exactly what they never saw coming.